Welcome to The Making of Bronn, a Game of Thrones story. Before he fought for gold, before he fought for Tyrion, he fought to survive. This is the story of a bastard with a broken nose, a sharper blade, and no use for honour. This is The Making of Bronn, written by Brian M. Brumbaugh, narrated by Ned Rattor. Let's begin. Chapter 1. A Poker to the Face. The Blackwood lands were quiet that year, not the peaceful kind of quiet, but the kind that felt like something had died and no one had noticed yet. The war was over. Robert Baratheon wore a crown, the Targaryens were dust on the wind, and the lords were busy pretending they hadn't all picked the wrong side. But none of that mattered in the piss-soaked corner of a crumbling village where Bronn lived. He was 5 years old when he first learned that love could hit like iron. The fire poker whistled past his ear and caught him square across the bridge of the nose. Bone cracked, blood sprayed, and his mother, drunk, wild-eyed and barefoot, screamed something at his younger brother, who was already halfway out the door. Bronn dropped to the floor, blinking through tears and blood, and laughed. It was a high-pitched, startled kind of laugh, the kind that makes people uncomfortable. His mother stared at him. Then she blinked. "Wrong boy," she muttered, stumbling back into her chair and knocking over a half-empty bottle of brown liquor. "Damn little shits look the same when you're squinting." Bronn sat there with blood running down his lips, tongue tasting copper, and knew something important had just happened. He'd been hit before, backhands, wooden spoons, a boot once, but this was different. This had broken something. He could feel it shifting when he breathed. He grinned wider. "Gonna have your nose crooked forever now," his brother said from the doorway, grinning like an idiot. Bronn shrugged. "Means people remember my face." The cottage they called home was half collapsed, with mould on the walls and piss in the corners. Rain leaked through the roof, and rats lived better. His mother didn't work, unless you counted drinking and cursing at ghosts. His father had been a traveller, which was short for some prick who never stuck around. They lived on what they could steal, beg, or wrestle from drunkards. Bronn's brother, Mick, was a year younger but twice as loud, always whining, always getting Bronn into fights and then hiding behind him. The two of them made a living lifting crusts from windowsills, digging through midden heaps, and conning gullible fishwives out of old cheese. They were pests, but Pests survived. 3 days after the poker incident, Bronn saw his first dead man. There was a commotion outside the inn, yelling, then silence. When Bronn snuck around the back, he saw a man lying in the mud, face grey, eyes open, a knife still stuck out of his gut, a boot print on his chest. The man had been a soldier, or had pretended to be one. Nobody cared now. A crow cawed from the rooftop. Bronn crept closer. The man was dead, no breath, no blinking. Then he saw it, a wet stain spreading under the corpse. The stink hit a second later. Bronn recoiled, gagged, and then, gods help him, started laughing again. "What's so funny, boy?" came the voice of old Tarka, the butcher, who'd wandered over. "He shit himself," Bronn said between snorts. "Dead men do that?" Tarka scratched his beard. "Aye. When the soul leaves, the body lets go. Doesn't care about pride no more." Bronn looked down at the corpse. "Guess even knights have to shit sometime." The butcher laughed. "You're a mean little bastard." Bronn shrugged. "Better than being a dead one." That night, as rain battered the roof and his mother wept over nothing in the corner, Bronn sat on the cold stone floor and prodded his swollen nose. It throbbed. It was crooked, and it was his now. The world, he decided, wasn't about being brave or good. It was about not being the one lying in the mud, shitting yourself while a boy laughed at your corpse. Bronn would never be that man. He'd be the one walking away, smiling, with blood on his blade and coin in his pocket. Chapter 2. Pest, Piss and Pit Fights. Bronn was 7 when he learned the word pest could be a profession. It started with piss, specifically Mix. His little brother, Ever the innovator, had decided to piss into a baker's flour sack through the window after the old man caught them trying to filch a loaf the day before. The sack burst during kneading, the bread came out green, someone vomited. Mick was a legend for a week. They called them the Piss Rats after that. Bronn didn't mind. He figured it was better than being called corpse or beggar. Titles didn't mean much when your ribs stuck out and your boots had holes, but reputation, that could get you food. Or fear, sometimes both. Their playground was the slums near the riverbanks, a stretch of muddy alleys, broken carts and half-burnt homes left behind after Robert's men had swept through. There were other boys, older and meaner, who claimed territory like dogs, piss-marked crates and hidden crates of rotting apples. Bronn and Mick started small, pilfering buttons, fishing coins from drunkards' pockets, selling dead rats to a tannery that paid in crusts and mouldy apples. But the real gold was in fighting. Underground tavern fights weren't just for adults, not when there were enough orphan boys with nothing to lose and old men who liked to bet on blood. The first time Bronn entered a pit, he was barefoot, underfed, and facing a boy twice his weight with arms like ham hocks and the name Tobbo the Hog. "You lose, you still get stew," the old man running the fights had said. "You win, you get stew and bread." Bronn squinted. "And if I kill him?" The man blinked. "Then you get stew, bread and my boots." Bronn grinned. He didn't kill Tobbo, but he bit his ear, head-butted him in the nose and kicked him between the legs twice. When Tobbo collapsed sobbing into the dirt, Bronn grabbed a handful of his hair and raised a fist to the cheering drunks. He didn't feel strong. He felt seen. He liked that better. By the end of the week, Bronn had 2 wins, a black eye, a cracked rib, and an appetite for applause. Mick cheered the loudest, waving a half-broken flag he stole from a dead knight's camp. He called it House Pissrat. They started training, well, their version of it, throwing rocks at chickens for aim, chasing each other with sticks, practicing dirty moves like biting, clawing and eye pokes. "Knights fight with rules," Bronn said. "We fight with reason." "What's the reason?" Mick asked. "To win, you twat." But the streets didn't hand out victories. One day, 3 older boys cornered Bronn behind the tanner's shack. They didn't want coin, they wanted reputation. They wanted to break the rat that made them look weak. Bronn fought back. Hard. But fists only go so far when you're outnumbered. They cracked his lip, slammed his face into a wall, and dragged him through the mud. His nose didn't break this time, but something else did. Something behind his eyes. Something that told him the world didn't care if you were clever or fast. It only cared how vicious you were. As they walked away laughing, Bronn spat blood, rolled onto his side, and swore one day he'd slit their throats while they slept. Not because it would be satisfying, because it would be fun. That night Mick gave him the last of his bread and said nothing. They sat side by side, dirty legs dangling in the ditch water, watching rats scurry past. "You're going to be the scariest man in the world," Mick said. Bronn snorted. "I'll settle for being the richest. Same thing, ain't it?" Bronn nodded slowly. In the firelight, his shadow looked like it was holding a sword. He liked that. The next fight, he didn't just win. He made it art. A dance of elbows, knees, and sarcasm. He ended it with a cracked stick across the other boy's throat and a wink to the crowd. He didn't fight for the stew anymore. He fought because it made people cheer, because it made them afraid, because every time he won, it felt like he was grabbing the world by the balls and daring it to blink first. And the world never blinked. But neither did Bronn. Chapter 3. The Woman with the Axe. By the time Bronn was 11, he was leaner, meaner, and quicker than boys twice his size, and every bit as hungry. The fights were drying up. One kid had bitten off another's finger, and the local septon threatened to summon a knight to clean out the rats, which, in this case, meant Bronn and Mick. So they ran, not far, just to the next piss-hole of a village downriver. It was the kind of place where chickens outnumbered people, where every house looked like it was one cough away from collapsing, and where nobody asked where you came from as long as you didn't steal their goats. Bronn stole anyway, because goats didn't taste like bread. The bakery was little more than a clay oven under a sagging lean-to. No windows, just a half-door and a stack of cooling loaves that might as well have had his name carved in them. He waited till dusk, slipped through the garden like a shadow. Mick kept lookout. One loaf, just one. That was the plan. But when Bronn reached for the bread, the door burst open, and she was there, the farmer's wife, big, red-faced, barefoot and furious. Her hair was tied in a greasy knot. Her arms were thicker than his legs, and in her hand, God's help him, was an axe. "You little shit!" she screamed and swung. Bronn dodged, barely. The blade hit the stack of firewood and stuck. He turned to run, but she was already on him. She pulled the axe free and came again, fast for someone so wide. Bronn fell, rolled, grabbed a rock. It wasn't enough. She raised the axe again. He reached into his belt, pulled the blade he'd stolen off a dead hedge knight 2 weeks earlier. He didn't think. He just threw. The knife spun, thunked, right into her throat. She stopped, made a sound, wet, choking, bubbling. Blood sprayed across the bread she'd baked. She staggered, dropped the axe, and collapsed face first into the dirt. Dead, just like that. Bronn sat there, panting, heart trying to punch its way out of his ribs. He hadn't meant to kill her. He hadn't meant anything. She was just loud, big, swinging metal. She would have killed him, right? He crawled over, pulled the knife from her neck, wiped it on her apron. Her eyes were still open, rolled up toward the moon like she couldn't believe it either. Mick ran up. "7 hells, did you kill her?" Bronn didn't answer. He picked up a still warm loaf of bread, tore it in half, handed one to Mick. "I was hungry. They didn't stay in that village. They didn't talk about it again." But Bronn remembered. Not just the killing, but what came after. He'd always thought fear was the strongest thing you could feel. Turns out, relief was stronger. And relief mixed with power? That was addictive. They slept in the woods that night, full-bellied and shivering. Mick kept flinching at every twig snap. Bronn just stared up at the stars, one hand on his blade. "What if they find us?" Mick whispered. "They won't. What if the gods saw?" Bronn snorted. "Then the gods can fuck off too." By morning the blood on his blade had dried, and the part of him that used to feel bad about things, it was drying up too. Chapter 4. Blades and Bastards. Bronn was 13 the first time someone paid him not to kill a man. It was a mistake. He killed the man anyway, not out of malice, not even for coin. The man had looked at him wrong, like he was something to be stepped on. Bronn hated that look more than he hated hunger. The man had been some dockside thug who ran collection for a tavern boss near Maidenpool. He tried to shake Bronn down for stealing from the bread cart. Bronn offered him a choice, leave or bleed. He chose wrong. Bronn didn't stay to explain. He looted the body, took a purse with 3 silver stags, and vanished into the fog like a rat with ambition. Mick was gone by then, caught fever 2 winters past, and never got warm again. Bronn had burned the body himself in a ditch filled with pine needles and silence. Now he had no brother, no home, no rules, just a blade and a belly that always wanted more. He drifted south, following the smoke and noise of river towns rebuilding after the rebellion. War left holes in the ground and holes in people, holes Bronn knew how to fill. He found work on a merchant's wagon train, not as a guard, he wasn't old enough for that, but as a runner, a scout, a distraction when things got ugly. When one of the older guards got gutted by bandits on the Rose Road, Bronn picked up the man's short sword and finished off the last wounded attacker. The merchant watched him stab the man 6 times in the chest and asked, "Boy, you ever think about doing this for coin?" Bronn didn't even look up. "I'm doing it for coin." The merchant introduced him to a man named Rask, a retired pit fighter with 1 eye, a missing ear, and a permanent scowl. Rask smelled like old onions and always drank from a wineskin that smelled like vinegar and regret. He trained Bronn, not because he liked him, but because he owed the merchant a favour and figured he could make something out of the wiry little bastard. "First lesson," Rask rasped, tossing Bronn a rusty dagger. "You don't fight to win, you fight to not lose. There's a difference." "What's the second lesson?" Bronn asked. "Don't ever ask about the third. They trained every day." Bronn got faster, smarter, meaner. He learned how to use weight and leverage, when to step forward instead of back, and how to draw blood without wasting breath. He also learned that honour was just a word people used when they were too slow to stab first. By 15, Bronn was making decent coin protecting caravans through the Kingswood. He slept beside horses, ate with sellswords twice his age, and lost his virginity to a drunk woman named Elara who thought he was 17. She passed out halfway through. Bronn didn't care. He rolled over, laughed at the ceiling and muttered, "That's it, all that fuss for this." He left before she woke, took 2 silver off her belt and bought himself a new pair of boots. At 16, he watched a man burn to death in a stable fire. No one helped. Bronn didn't either, but he did steal the man's coin purse while he screamed. That night, Rask called him over, looked him dead in the eyes and said, "You're ready. Ready for what? To stop being a rat and start being a bastard?" Bronn grinned. "Isn't much of a difference," Rask spat. "The difference is rats hide. Bastards walk in the front door, take what they want, and leave bodies on the floor." That winter, Bronn left Rask with a nod, a pouch of stolen coin, and a smile. He didn't say goodbye. Rask didn't ask for one. Chapter 5, 6 gold cloaks and a broken nose. It started, as most of Bronn's finest moments did, with a woman, a stolen ring, and someone else's piss. He was 16, flush with coin from a caravan job gone right for once. He'd just finished a tumble with a woman whose name he never caught. She'd introduced herself with a kiss and left with his boots. Bronn didn't mind. He'd been planning to walk out of the brothel barefoot anyway, just to piss off the innkeeper next door, who hated muddy floors. It was nearly dawn when he stepped into the alley behind the wine hall, stretched, and immediately found himself face to face with 6 armoured men in gold cloaks. One of them was grinning, the others were not. "You Bronn?" the lead one asked. Bronn looked down at his muddy feet, scratched his stubbled chin and said, "Do I owe someone money or bed someone's sister?" The grinner stepped forward. "That ring you gave the girl last night belonged to a merchant we found gutted in the street. Funny thing, finding it on your whore's finger." Bronn's grin turned thin. If I killed him, I sure as shit wouldn't leave the jewellery. I'm cheap, not stupid." One of the cloaks cracked his knuckles. "Don't matter. We need a body. Yours'll do." They drew clubs. Bronn didn't. Not yet. He had 2 knives, a short sword, and a chipped smile. But numbers like 6, those didn't bend to steel alone. So he played for time. "You boys sure you want to do this?" he asked. "There's 6 of you and only 1 of me." "Exactly." Bronn nodded. "Then it hardly seems fair." The leader snorted. "That's the idea." "No," Bronn said, eyes glinting. "I meant for you." Then he moved. The first one went down with a knife to the thigh and an elbow to the throat. Bronn twisted his blade free and rolled, grabbing a trash-can lid and smashing it into another's face. Someone clubbed him in the ribs. He spun, drove a dagger into the man's side and kicked his knee backwards. That's when the leader caught him across the face with a club. Crack! His nose shattered. Again. Blood poured. Bronn staggered, dizzy, seeing 3 gold cloaks where one stood. He spit, wiped his mouth, and chuckled. "Missed," he said, teeth red. The leader raised his club for the killing blow. Bronn ducked, slammed his forehead into the man's gut, then drove his knife up under the ribs. He turned and threw it into the next one's leg. The man screamed. Bronn pounced. By the end of it, 3 were dead, 2 unconscious, and 1 ran screaming into the sunrise. Bronn stood alone, shirt torn, bleeding from nose, lip and shoulder, breathing hard and grinning. A local innkeep poked his head out the door. "What in the 7 hells happened out here?" Bronn wiped his blade on one of the cloak's tabards. "Gold cloaks tried to collect on a murder I didn't commit." "You win?" Bronn stepped over a corpse. "I ain't the one in the gutter." He cleaned himself up, bought new boots, and started getting strange looks in every tavern he entered. People whispered his name, some in fear, some in admiration. It was the first time in his life Bronn felt something like fame, not the kind bards sing about, the kind you earn in blood, piss, and cracked teeth. A week later, a merchant offered him double to guard his goods through the Kingswood. "You Bronn?" the man asked, voice tight with awe. Bronn adjusted his fresh bandage and smiled. "Depends. You paying up front?" That was the moment. That was when he stopped being just another gutter rat with a knife. That was when the name started to matter. Bronn, the bastard who beat 6. Bronn the bloody, the grinning, the one who walked away. Chapter 6. Beyond the Wall. Bronn didn't like the cold. It crept into your boots, into your bones, into your piss stream. It made knives slower, lips crack, and fingers fumble. And yet here he was, on the ass end of the world, riding north with 6 men he didn't like, for coin that barely felt real. Just escort a noble's bastard on his little adventure, the man in White Harbour had said. Few days' ride, maybe see some wildlings. He never mentioned the wall. He definitely never mentioned going beyond it. Bronn had taken the job because the pay was high, and the man looked nervous. Nervous men paid well, and desperate ones didn't ask for references. So he joined a small party heading north, one sour-faced bastard son of House Flint, 3 of his drinking companions, and 2 other mercs who looked like they'd once lost a fight with a forge. By the time they reached Castle Black, Bronn was already regretting it. Not for the cold, not for the long ride, for the silence. The wall loomed like death itself, ice and stone and shadow, no banners, no songs, just wind howling like a wolf that forgot how to stop. "I hear wildlings eat their dead," one of the mercs said, staring at the gate. "Or fuck 'em, better than eating your horse," Bronn muttered, tightening his cloak. They passed through. He noticed the way the black-cloaked guards looked at them, not with respect, but with exhaustion. Men on the edge of the world, men who'd stopped caring what they saw. That made Bronn nervous. They set off the next morning, east along the tree line, then north into the true wild. For 3 days it was snow, trees, and nothing else. No wildlings, no animals, not even birds. On the 4th day they found a corpse, or what used to be a corpse. It was frozen in place, hunched over, pale as bone, and stripped of flesh in places that didn't make sense, like something had peeled it. Bronn leaned close. "No blood," he muttered. "No wounds either," said one of the mercs, voice hoarse. "Just cut open and left." Then the eyes opened. Chaos. The thing lunged, inhuman, silent, and impossibly fast. One of the men screamed. Another fell. Bronn moved on instinct, driving his blade into its side. It didn't flinch. He hacked again, at the neck this time. The thing shuddered and fell. It didn't bleed. It shattered like ice. They built a fire that night and burned the remains. The noble's bastard vomited twice and refused to speak. What in the 7 hells was that? One man muttered, staring into the flames. Bronn didn't answer. He was too busy staring at the woods. They weren't alone. That night, Bronn didn't sleep. He sat with his back to a tree, blade across his knees, cloak pulled tight. By morning, 2 of their group were missing. No blood, no tracks, just gone. They turned back without a word. No one argued, not even the bastard. On the ride back, one of the surviving mercs leaned over and whispered, "You think we'll make it?" Bronn stared straight ahead. "You already said we, which means you're depending on someone else. That's not a good sign." 2 days later, he slit that man's throat while he slept and took his boots. He made it back alone. When the gate opened, the night's watchguard said nothing, just raised an eyebrow. "You look like hell," the man muttered. Bronn didn't stop walking. "Hell looks like me." He returned to White Harbour and found the man who'd hired him, dropped the noble's signet ring on the table and said, "He didn't make it." The man stared at the ring. "Was it wildlings?" Bronn drained his ale. "Wilder." He never spoke of it again. But when someone asked him years later why he'd ever gone beyond the wall, Bronn just shrugged and said, "Work." Then he smirked, poured another drink and added, "Worst part, didn't even get to fuck a wildling." Chapter 7. The Widow and the Wager. She introduced herself as Lady Marla of Redridge. Bronn introduced himself as just Bronn. They met in a smoky inn south of Harrenhal, where the wine was cheap, the fire was warm, and half the men wore swords they didn't know how to use. Marla wore mourning black that fit too tightly to be accidental. Her husband, she said, had choked on a chicken bone 2 moons past. Bronn had seen cleaner lies in brothel laundry, but he didn't care. She was rich, she was bored, and she was looking at him like he was meat that could talk. By morning he was in her bed, and by midday he was her personal guard. "Bodyguard," she'd purred, sliding a pouch of silver across the table. With emphasis on the body, Bronn wasn't in love. He wasn't even particularly fond of her, but she paid well, screamed louder than most, and liked to show him off at the market like a dog with sharp teeth. That was good enough. For now, she had enemies. All noblewomen did. Petty lords who claimed her husband owed them coin, cousins with ambitions, a bastard brother with eyes too close together and a temper like spoiled milk. Bronn watched them all, weighed them, planned. "Do you think they'll come for me?" she asked one night, her head on his chest, fingers tracing the scar on his ribs. Bronn stared at the ceiling. "I hope so. I get paid more when they do," she laughed. Then she cried. He let her. The threats came quick. A poisoned dog, a broken window, a message nailed to her front door, "Widows bleed sweeter." Bronn responded by catching the would-be assassin in her wine cellar and nailing his hand to a beam with a rusty spike. Then he made him drink his own poison. Marla watched from the stairs, trembling. When it was done, she grabbed Bronn by the collar and dragged him to bed. For a time, life was good. Easy, too easy. Bronn got lazy, comfortable. That's when he noticed her letters. Sealed with wax he didn't recognize, always written late at night, always gone by morning. He started watching her the way he watched enemies. What he saw made him smile. She was planning to have him killed. She'd offered his head to a cousin in return for protection and a seat at the table. The cousin had hired a trio of swords from Old Town. Amateurs. Bronn killed the first in her garden with a pruning hook. The second he drowned in her bath, naked, whistling, and enjoying himself a little too much. The third, well, Bronn let the third one in. Let him sneak into the bedroom, let him see the body under the blankets, let him creep closer. Then Bronn slit his throat from beneath the bed. He sat on the edge of the bed, covered in blood, sipping wine when Marla walked in. She froze. "Problem?" he asked, motioning to the corpse. Her lips trembled. "You knew?" He stood slowly, crossed the room and whispered in her ear. "Everyone plays games, Marla. You just forgot what the prize was." That night he poured her wine. She drank it, smiling faintly. Then her eyes widened. She clutched her throat. Bronn caught her as she collapsed, gently lowering her to the floor. "Should have picked a better poison," he whispered. "Yours tasted like piss." He left before sunrise, took her cousin's bribe money, the deed to her house, and her late husband's sword. When a guard at the gate asked where the lady was, Bronn said, grieving, said she didn't want to be disturbed. The guard nodded. "God's help her," Bronn smirked. "Unlikely." That night, drunk and alone, Bronn stared at the stars and muttered to himself, "Never trust a woman who promises two things, love and land." He slept with one eye open, and a dagger under his pillow. Chapter 8. The Brotherhood bleeds. The Black Cross Brotherhood wasn't a real brotherhood. It was a mob of half-trained killers, ex-soldiers, washed-up hedge knights, and one man with a warhammer and no jaw. They rode under a black banner, stitched from old cloaks, swore no oaths, and got paid in copper, whores and stolen chickens. Bronn fit right in. He joined outside Stokeworth after bedding a woman who turned out to be married to a butcher with 9 brothers. The Brotherhood was passing through, short a blade after one of theirs choked on an arrow. "Can you use a sword?" their leader asked. Bronn shrugged. "Can you use a latrine?" He was in. Their leader was a big brute named Gorick the Gallant, a joke name if there ever was one. Gorick had been a knight once, until he'd bash a stable boy's head in for stealing a saddle. He ruled the Brotherhood with fear, spit, and a spiked mace he called Gentle Sister. Bronn didn't like him, didn't hate him either, but every time Gorick called someone boy, Bronn imagined slipping a blade between his ribs, just in case. They fought skirmishes for desperate lords, looted burnt villages, guarded caravans they later robbed, and once tried to shake down a hedge wizard who turned out to be a real one. They buried the man who laughed first. Bronn didn't. Within 2 months, Bronn had killed 6 men, not in battle, but during arguments, one over dice, one over a woman, one for snoring too loud. The other 3 had drawn steel first. He was well-liked, feared mostly, but well-liked. Gorick didn't like that. He started giving Bronn worse assignments. Less coin, cold food. Bronn responded by growing more charming, smiling more, giving better advice. He became popular. Among killers, that's more dangerous than a blade. Then came the job in the Riverlands. escorting a merchant lord's treasure caravan through bandit country. Gold, real gold. Gorick wanted it for himself, so did Bronn. Difference was, Gorick trusted his men. Bronn didn't. Bronn made his move 2 nights before the ambush. He approached 3 of the younger men, good fighters, smarter than they looked. "Gorick's going to rob the merchant," he said. They nodded. "Then kill the rest of us to make the split cleaner." They hesitated. Bronn smiled. "Or we kill him and take it all." The plan was simple. Wait for the ambush, then turn on Gorick when the fighting started. It wasn't clean, it wasn't glorious, it was perfect. The bandits attacked. Gorick led the charge. Bronn and his boys let him. Then, as Gorick raised gentle sister over a screaming guard, Bronn stepped in behind him and drove a dagger into the base of his spine. The big man dropped. Bronn slit his throat before he could scream. The other men blinked, confused. Then Bronn pointed at the bandits and shouted, "Gorick's dead. I'm in charge. Kill them all and get paid." They cheered. They obeyed. And just like that, Bronn owned the Brotherhood. After the job, he paid the men double what Gorick ever had. He handed out fresh blades, new boots, and let them pick which inn to burn down that night. They started calling him Bronn the Bastard King. He didn't correct them, didn't keep the Brotherhood either. He left 2 nights later with the merchant's daughter, 5 sacks of gold, and all the horses. He didn't look back. When the Brotherhood's survivors tracked him down months later in Duskendale, he bought them around, paid back the stolen shares, and poisoned their wine. He was halfway to King's Landing before their corpses went cold. Chapter 9. The Lion and the Wolf. The Crossroads Inn was the kind of place where people went to forget who they were. Farmers drank beside hedge knights. Bastards shared tables with bastard makers. No banners, no lords, no laws that couldn't be paid to disappear. Bronn liked it. He'd been there 3 days. Enough time to spend coin, win 2 fights, and sleep with a brewer's daughter who moaned like a wounded sheep. He was halfway through a bowl of onion stew when the door burst open and trouble walked in. Catelyn Stark. He didn't know her name, but he knew the look. Noble, angry, moving like someone who thought the room belonged to her. And beside her, a dwarf, a Lannister. Bronn chewed slower. The room tensed as Catelyn addressed the inn. Loud, clear. "This man, Tyrion Lannister, tried to murder my son." Silence. Then steel scraped wood. Men stood. Bronn didn't. Not yet. She called for loyal men to escort her to the Vale. Said there'd be reward, honour, justice. Bronn liked exactly none of those things, but he did like gold. And more importantly, he hated boredom. He rose slowly, wiped his mouth, and said, "You'll need someone who doesn't die easy." Sir Roderick looked him up and down. "You don't look like a knight." Bronn smiled. "Good thing I'm not." The road to the Vale was cursed. Narrow paths, crumbling ledges, ambush country. Bronn knew it, felt it in his spine, and the dwarf never shut up. Tyrion Lannister rode like a man who'd rather walk, and talked like he was paid by the word. Bronn didn't mind him. Sharp tongue, smarter than most lords, probably smarter than Catelyn Stark too. Not that Bronn cared. He wasn't there for the politics. He was there for the fight, and oh, did it come. 2 days into the mountain pass, the hill tribes came screaming down the rocks like wild dogs. Bronn moved before anyone shouted. He cut down one man before the others drew steel. He fought dirty. Dirt in the eyes, knees to groins, a boot to the cliff edge that sent one tribal screaming into the abyss. A boy, barely 16, tried to spear him. Bronn threw his sword and skewered him like a roast pig, then drew a second blade from his boot and kept moving. Tyrion survived. Barely. Sir Roderick took a gash to the arm. Catelyn's horse was gutted. Bronn walked away whistling, wiping blood off his sleeves. "Still think I'm not worth the coin?" he asked Sir Roderick. The old knight glared at him, said nothing. But Catelyn looked, really looked. She was beginning to understand what Bronn was. Not a sword, a weapon. When they reached the Vale, Bronn expected to be dismissed. Job done. Go home, spend coin, find trouble. But then the dwarf opened his mouth again. "I demand a trial by combat." Bronn blinked, looked at him like he'd grown a second head. Tyrion turned, smirking. "Any volunteers?" The knight stepped back. The squires pretended to be invisible. Only Bronn stood still. Slowly, lazily, he raised a hand. "I'll stand for the dwarf." Catelyn's mouth dropped open. Lady Lysa shrieked. Bronn just smiled. "I like a good fight," he said, cracking his neck. "And I don't like seeing people thrown out moon doors before breakfast." Chapter 10. Trial by Combat. The Eyrie was made of moonlight and menace. It soared above the clouds, white and cold, like it had been carved by gods with nothing better to do. Bronn hated it immediately. Too many stairs, not enough exits, and too many rich people pretending they weren't just wearing shinier shit than the rest of the realm. He'd seen better fortresses made of rotting wood and spite. Still, he had to admit, the view was impressive, especially if you liked falling. The moon door was open, a black void in the floor, waiting for someone to lose. Lady Lysa was perched on her throne like a hawk in heat. Her boy sat beside her, sucking his thumb and mumbling about making people fly. Bronn ignored them all. His eyes were on Ser Vardis Aegon. The knight was built like a statue, broad, armoured head to toe, face grim beneath his helm. He looked like a man who'd never been anything but noble. The kind of knight who practised with blunted blades and dreamed of dying gloriously. Bronn practised by not dying. He wore boiled leather, mismatched braces, and a smile that made people check their coin purses. He had no sigil, no squire, no plan, just a sword. Tyrion leaned in. "You sure about this?" Bronn rolled his shoulders. "He's slow. That's all I need. You could still die." Bronn smirked. "I could also fuck a sceptre. Doesn't mean I will." The duel began. Ser Vardis moved like a warhorse, deliberate, heavy, righteous. Bronn moved like a snake with debts to settle. He didn't attack. He danced, dodged, ducked under swings, rolled behind pillars, kicked over a brazier to make the floor slick with ash. Ser Vardis growled, swinging harder. The crowd murmured. Some booed. "He won't fight," Lysa cried. "He runs." Bronn spun, grinned, and called out, "I'm just making sure he's the one flying, not me." He wore the knight down. Let the armour do the work. Let the heat build. Let the mistakes come. And when Ser Vardis finally overreached, sweat dripping, lungs heaving, Bronn slipped inside his guard, ducked the mace, and drove his blade up through the knight's armpit. A scream, a stagger, blood. Then a second slash across the back of the knee. The knight dropped. Bronn circled behind, placed a boot on his back, and looked to the Lady of the Vale. "Should I kill him?" Lysa shrieked. "Yes." So Bronn did, quick, clean, and just as Ser Vardis's body fell toward the moon door, he gave it a little kick. The crowd gasped as the armoured body vanished into the sky. The boy clapped. He flew. Bronn cleaned his blade on the knight's cloak. Tyrion walked up, smiling thinly. "You fight without honour." Bronn sheathed his sword. "Yeah." He looked down the open door, then back at Tyrion. But he did. They left the Vale together. A dwarf and a bastard. An unlikely pair. But Bronn had found something in Tyrion that he recognised. Survival, not the noble kind, the dirty, scraping, clever kind. And maybe, just maybe, that was worth sticking around for. Author's note: some men rise because of birthright, others because of destiny. Bronn rose because he knew how to duck, stab, and walk away whistling. This story isn't about honour, glory, or fate. It's about surviving in a world that crushes the weak and buries the noble. Bronn didn't ask for a seat at the table. He took a chair, kicked someone out of it, and demanded they pay him for the inconvenience. Thanks for joining me on this grimy, blood-soaked, darkly funny ride through the life of one of Westeros's most unpredictable bastards. And remember, in the Game of Thrones, you win or you die. But Bronn prefers to get paid and stay alive. Please give us a like if you enjoyed this story, leave a comment below, and subscribe for next great tale. Brian M. Brumbaugh.